Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today is Speaker of the House, Daniel Hawkins, out of Wichita, the 100th District. And Daniel, it's good to have you here again. I don't have to call you Daniel now, do I?
No, you can just call me Dan.
Okay. Yeah. The legislature's off and rolling, and this is the first time we've had a chance to do a legislative update. And so you got a lot on your plate right now.
Boy, do we. It's we just finished our fourth week. Coming in here on a Friday right after we finished, we've had a lot going on. Really, for the legislature, though, that start of the biennium is a slow start. We start from scratch. There's absolutely no bills out there. So this week we finally had our first time to go on general orders where we actually debate bills. We had 4 judiciary bills we debated, right up your alley, Doug. We always are careful to not say simple bills because sometimes simple bills can blow up on you. But these were pretty simple bills, and we had 4 freshmen carrying the bills, and so they were all attorneys except for one, and so they did very well. We had a lot of fun getting them started into the process.
What do you find is the biggest difference from your previous job as majority leader to Speaker of the House?
I think probably the easiest way to put it is it's our freshmen say coming in it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. For me, it's kind of the same way. I get into the office at 6:30 every morning, and the reason why I get in early is because at 8 o'clock when the meetings start, they do not stop until about 3:30 in the afternoon. Straight through. One meeting after another. All kinds of different issues coming before you. So I'll get in early and get my work done, then start into the meeting schedule, and then about 3:30, 4 o'clock, I can actually settle back in and get the work done that I need to do and finish up the day. So the pace is very, very fast.
Well, I bet it is.
It is. Yeah.
Was that a surprise to you, or you didn't know it would be that much?
I did, because as majority leader, I held a pretty good schedule as majority leader, but I also was down the hall from the speaker, and I knew all the people that were going into that office daily, and so I always knew his schedule was much more packed than mine. But I'm experiencing it now, and it truly is a packed schedule. It really is, from the time you get there.
And now that you're as a Speaker of the House, do you interact with the governor a lot?
Yes, we do. Imagine that. So, Doug, the last few years when I've come and spent some time with you, I always had told you I didn't meet with her hardly at all. In fact, in the last 4 years as majority leader, I met with her 3 times. As Speaker, in the first 4 weeks, I've met with her 3 times. So I think that kind of has some effect of the position. She's wanting to meet with the head of the body. So Senate President Ty Masters and I have met together with her twice. And then one time he was supposed to show and he didn't. So I had a meeting with her by myself. And this next week, we're going to have at least 2 more meetings with her. So we're meeting with the governor a lot. That's refreshing to me, because we should be meeting. We should be talking. Even though we're different politically, we still need to talk through things. And even though we may not agree on everything, there's some things we can work together on, and we should.
Good. So, yeah, I would hope that would be the situation. Yeah. I was thinking about your home district here at Wichita. It's 100th District, isn't it?
Yes.
And I had read or heard somewhere about Apex.
Yes,
Apex. What is that?
So last year we passed the Apex bill, and what came out of that, it's really a toolbox to attract big business to Kansas. And as you remember, Panasonic came and is being located in DeSoto. So we can only do 1 Apex bill a year. Last year it was Panasonic. This year, it's a company, we just announced it yesterday, had a big press conference, and of course State Finance Council got together and approved it. It's a company called Integra, and what they do is they test computer chips come in a big wafer, a flat wafer, some of them that big, with all these little chips on it. Well, they test those. Every one of those wafers have to be tested to make sure those chips work. And if a chip doesn't work, then it's flagged in there, and they know that one chip is bad. That way they don't put it in something and it doesn't work. And so they test all of these chips. They're the biggest largest company that tests chips in the United States. And what's coming is they have so much work that they're going to expand $1.5 billion worth of plant.
Wow.
And they're going to bring 2,000 jobs to Kansas and literally start a brand new sector in Kansas. It's so exciting. You know, we're known for a lot of things. We're known, especially in Wichita, for aviation. We're an agriculture state. We may now become a chip state,
Well,
which would be kind of cool.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Well, all right, we're going to cut away, take a break. We're at legislative updates with Speaker of the House, Dan Hawkins. Be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest is Speaker of the House, Dan Hawkins from the 100th District in Wichita. And Dan, I was, while we were resetting, I was looking at some of this. Better way. What does all this mean?
So, Doug, when I actually, clear back in August, when it kind of become pretty clear that I would be the next speaker, one of the complaints all these years is that the legislature never has a plan. It's always just reacting to whatever comes their way. And so I thought, we really need to develop a roadmap, a plan for us to work from. And so during that time, I met with the Senate president, and we each kind of went our separate ways and went to our caucuses, and I literally crisscrossed the state talking to each one of my members. And during that time, I kept an exhaustive diary of everything that was important to them. When we got back together right after the election, the Senate president and I looked at all of those things that we had found out from our members who really are reacting to their constituents, and kind of assimilated it together, and then came up with a plan, a roadmap that we could work from, and we named it A Better Way. And A Better Way is made up of 8 separate buckets. And these buckets contain ideas, but not bills. It was just ideas, things that were important to people, issues that came out that were important to people. So our 8 buckets are made up of things like it's your money, our commitment to taxpayers, it's your health, our commitment to a free market health system, it's your future, and that is our commitment to students and making sure our students get a quality education. Our commitment to the economy, making sure that our economy does well and is vibrant. Our Help Wanted, which is our commitment to the workforce shortage, making sure that we help our businesses get the help that they need to be able to operate. Protecting the vulnerable, law and order, our commitment to a safe and secure Kansas, and lastly, freedom starts here, our commitment to freedom, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so we took those 8 buckets, and we have ideas in them, but we didn't have anything else. And then as the legislature ramps up and bills start coming out, what we've done is we put each one of those bills that fits into these 8 buckets, we put them in there. We have over 100 bills now scattered out through those 8 buckets. So now not only is it a roadmap for us to work towards getting things done, it's also a scorecard. So literally at the end of this session, we can go through and we can check off each thing we've done within those buckets. At the end of the biennium, the next 2 years, at the end of the next session, we can also continue to check off, and now we have something to go back to our constituents and say, this is what we did. These were the things that you told us were important to you, and we told our leadership what was important to us, and now we can report back to you, these are the things we accomplished. So it really is a roadmap that we've never had before, and it's a way for us to keep track of exactly what we did. It's a bottom-up approach. It's not a top-down. In the past, in fact, a couple of years ago, if you remember, the leadership did a 5-point plan, and it was 5 bills. Those bills came from us, and they really never were embraced because it wasn't important to them. It was just important to us. This is important to them. And how that manifested itself, and it showed how important it was when we announced it. So we announced it on the second day of session to our caucus. The Senate announced it to their caucus on that Monday, the first day. Then on Tuesday of that first week, we had a press conference, and we laid it out to the press. We had over 80 legislators behind us, packed into that room shoulder to shoulder.
Awesome.
I've never seen that before. But here's what's really important. is our members feel so invested in it. If you look at their email newsletters that's going out weekly, each time they're talking about the Better Way and the bills that are already being produced in the Better Way. And so it's really been a great tool for us, an awesome tool.
Well, that sounds like it. And if I'm understanding what you're talking about, it's like, well, I have an idea for this, and rather than me taking that bill and going up with it, and somebody else is thinking, well, this would be good if we had this with it, and somebody else, now you're kind of getting it mixed it right at the beginning of it, and then you're refining it. And so when it gets up to the point of where there's voting for it, there's going to be an awful lot of support because it hits a home run for many people.
Truly is, and that's exactly right. And I'm not sure that we thought about that when we started it, but that's what's manifested itself, is that truly this is building one on top of another, and it's truly been an awesome experience, I think, for our legislature to really have that roadmap to work from. Yeah. And he said that there was 8 of those, so that you're working through. Would this be something that's done like weekly, daily? How do you do that? It is. So we have our majority leader, and you've met him before, Chris Croft.
Sure.
Chris was, I know, on your show several times last year. Chris is actually tracking that. So as those bills come or are introduced into the House, he's placing those in those buckets. And each week at our caucus meeting, he reports to the caucus, this is how many bills are in each bucket. And then as they come out to the House, come out of the committees and into the House for debate, and we debate them and we send them on, he's also reporting exactly what we've done that week. So every week we kind of know where we're at. So instead of being reactive, which is what we normally have been, we're always reacting. Now we're being proactive.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. What else have you got going?
Well, we had that first week, we had the governor's budget. The governor's budget's $9.5 billion. It's actually the largest budget in the history of Kansas. It's about $1.1 billion larger than last year's budget. And so right now, our Appropriations Committee, especially in the House, and of course the Ways and Means in the Senate, they have been waiting for that budget to finally get to them. Even though it was out kind of in an aggregate form. Now it's been detailed out by our our department, our Legislative Research Department, KLRD. So they've broken it out into the budget pieces. The budget committees just received their budget books this week, and so now they're starting to pour through their budgets and starting to bring all the agencies in to determine what our priority is going to be versus what the governor's priority is going to be. I do believe that you'll see us pare that budget down. $1.1 billion increase in budget is huge. You have that happen when the federal government gives you all this one-time money. It's kind of easy to bloat that budget. We're going to take kind of the same thing we did last year, and that's we're going to pay off debt. So we're going to use that money to pay off debt, to put some more money into the rainy day fund, and then to give targeted tax relief.
Good. That sounds like a good plan from there. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're listening to Legislative Updates with Dan Hawkins. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. With me is Speaker of the House, Dan Hawkins, from the 100th District out of Wichita. Dan, I remember from having done Legislative Updates last year, and there were lots of water issues. Are there still issues pertaining to the water?
There really are, Doug. It was really amazing to me as I drove all across the state during the last 6 months. It didn't really matter what part of the state I was in. Everybody talked about water, all the way from Johnson County and their water issues to Wichita, Sedgwick County, and on out across the state, especially in the western part of the state. So water truly is an issue. And so we kept the water committee intact. We did change chairmanships. Our old chairman left and retired, and you knew him, Ron Highland over at Wamego. Sure. So he retired. But I knew that we had to keep it and we had to really fix it. We didn't get a whole lot of traction in the last 2 years. And although water was important at that time, it's even more important now. And so I decided to make Representative Jim Minix from Scott City, our water chair. And then my vice chair is Cindy Howerton out of Wichita. So we have rural and urban leadership in the water committee. And I think it was a really smart move. Number one, anybody that, and especially where this goes, people out in western Kansas know Jim Minix very well. He's a cattle producer, a great farmer and a rancher. And he looks at things from a global perspective. He understands how important it is to farmers, but he also understands how important it is for the urban people to also have a seat at the table. And he's a very deliberative guy. So he has literally brought people from all over the state, people who water is very important to him, brought them, set them down at the table, and started the discussion. And one of the first things that he came to me, he says, Dan, our first challenge is we have to come up with a funding mechanism to fund our water problems, to have the money to take care of our water problems. And so he actually came in this week into my office. We spent about 30 minutes going through his budget plan, and he's wanting to take a very small sliver of our sales tax across the state and dedicate it to water. It's only about 0.08%. So it's a very small amount, but that small amount actually 0.8%. 0.8%. I had to think through that. It's about $54 million. I'd had several water people come in. I had some people from the Water Authority come in. I had a person from Water One up in Johnson County. They said actually it would take a lot more than that, probably as much as 65, 70 million to really fund it right. But we believe what Jim's doing is probably where we're going to start. So it's going to dedicate about 54 million to funding the water. So that's really, he's working on getting that through the committee right now, and that's a little bit of a process. He's really worked hard. Next year, he will really start into the actual issue, how we're going to start attacking the water problem across the state. It was interesting for me when I was, actually, I think it was my first week in Topeka this year as speaker. I had a call from a cattle producer down in, actually a farmer, I shouldn't say cattle producer, he was actually a farmer, had center pivots. He had a well that he'd had for many years, and back when it was first drilled, that would produce about 1,000 gallons a minute of water for his irrigation. He said now he's lucky to get 250 gallons a minute out. So the water is really truly an issue out there, but all you have to do is to drive across the state, look at the ponds as you go across the state, and they're dry. So the water is going to continue to be an issue. I do like the fact that the governor is also getting in the act. I believe we will see some type of a commission developed from the governor from the administrative side. Hopefully those two will talk really well together. Whatever she develops along with our committee, and we can work together to really solve the water problem in our state. And it truly is a big problem.
It sounds like it, Dan, and I remember when we talked about it last year, it seemed as I was listening to the conversations about it that, this is really a western Kansas area, irrigation, ponds filling in, but now this is truly statewide, and it's become a very serious matter to be addressed before it gets worse.
No, absolutely. Just think of it from on the urban standpoint. Where does urban areas get their water from? Most of the time it's from lakes. And many of our lakes are starting to silt in or have silted in. So they have to figure out how to work those lakes. And what they found out is dredging a lake is very expensive. It's almost cost prohibitive. So they developed this technology where they can bring this boat in with a massive jet that goes down and just blasts the bottom and creates mud and turns into silt that can be pushed on out of the lake. And so they're really starting to develop that as a way, just stirring the bottom up, but have enough current going through the lake that they can wash it out and get it on downriver. And so we have to figure those things out, or we're going to have cities that all of a sudden aren't going to be able to have water. It's kind of like, I remember a few years ago where there was some towns down in southeast Kansas that drew their water from rivers, and the rivers were so low they were having to haul water into their town. So that's how important water is. We don't really think. We take water and our resources for granted until we don't have them. And when we don't have them, it's almost too late. And we've got to really work on this before it becomes too late for us.
I'm glad to see that that's being addressed.
Yeah, so it's going to continue to work. We're going to work on it until we get it solved. So I think this is a multi-year approach. It's not going to be something that'll be solved in one session.
All right, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back. You're watching Legislative Updates with Dan Hawkins. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. And Dan, this will be our last session of this first show for this year, and really enjoyed it. Appreciate you stopping, and I know you've had a full schedule because you filled me in on it, and I appreciate it. So where do you want to go from here to end this out?
Well, I think one of the things that we could talk just briefly about is education. And you're going to see lots of things coming out of our Education Committee and our K through 12 Budget Committee. I think it's really going to be interesting watching this as it builds. One of the biggest things that COVID caused was people upset because schools were shut down. And so it really kind of brought parents' choice in school to the forefront. Parents want to be sure and be ensured that their kids are getting a good education. And so you're going to see some school choice bills come out. Matter of fact, the first hearing will probably be this next week, and they're going to be talking about ESAs, educational savings accounts for their kids. Last year, we had a piece where we opened up the borders. This year, we're going to take it a little bit farther, and so just stay tuned because that's going to get really big. We're going to have lots of stuff happening, and people are going to have to pay attention.
Well, Dan, I appreciate you coming in and out of Topeka on your way back to Wichita and sharing this with us, because this means an awful lot. So we'll see you next time on Legislative Updates with you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Doug.
Take care. Hope you have enjoyed this segment of Legislative Updates with Dan Hawkins. I'm Doug Thompson with special guest Dan Hawkins. Tune in next time for another Legislative Update.